Lynley, you know I get bored quick.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, believe it or not.
Okay.
If something doesn't change, I get really bored with it. And we've been talking about ways, how do we keep mixing up the Glass House so that it feels different so that I can continue to do it? And we've been talking about variety because variety is the spice of life. In fact, the way we eat cereal illustrates this truth.
I actually don't believe that variety is the spice of life.
I know you don't, which is I'm trying to convince you of
I
that.
know. It's not going to work.
So tell them what you eat every morning.
Well, I am actually trying to change because I did just read that Honey Nut Cheerios is the second most sugary cereal in America.
I still can't believe that.
And I have to date eaten a bowl of Honey Nut Cheerios since I was like 5 every single day of my life, even if on vacation. So I haven't in the last 2 weeks.
So much so that often when I'm driving home from work, I will get 3 letters on my phone in a text, HNC, which means stop and get me Honey Nut Cheerios.
Like 911, basically.
But me and the boys, we have like 9 different boxes of cereal because it might be Fruity Pebbles one day and, Raisin Bran the next. So variety for me is what makes life fun. So we talked about there's 3 different kinds of episodes we would like to try to keep recording. One would just be the traditional interview with the pastor and wife or ministry leader and his wife where we're just confessing one of the struggles or emotions with ministry.
Right.
That's one.
Yep.
The second would be something that it's just you and me taking about 20 minutes and bantering about a subject that we think people would like to hear about.
Well, and a lot of this is coming from feedback that we've received, and people say, "Hey, we really like it when you guys do the commentary because we'd like to hear kind of your thoughts on it." And so we thought, well, we could do a short episode. Also, being shorter, it's easier to listen to it if you're in the car on a short trip or something like that. And the third one would be the biggest mistakes that ministry leaders have made in their ministry career.
Or in their life. So
Sure.
Getting a pastor and wife on and saying, what's one of the biggest mistakes you've ever made and what did you learn from it? I love it when people are honest about their struggles, their shortcomings. It kind of sets me free to realize I'm not the only one with human skin.
We just read a quote about this, and Missy Branch had said, smart people learn from their mistakes, wise people learn from other people's mistakes. And so that's kind of the point of this, is that you guys could learn from our mistakes. Not that you're not going to make your own.
That's right.
But that you would hear from pastors and Ben and I, and to be able to say, I don't want to do that.
So today we're going to hop into this idea of you and I taking a topic and chasing it down. And I want to talk to you about partnership in ministry, the highs and the lows, the roller coaster of that ride.
You want to talk to me about it?
Yeah, I want to talk to you about it. I want us to talk out loud about it.
Are we going to have a problem?
Of course. That's why we have other people in the room for accountability. So we live in Nashville, Tennessee.
We do.
And it's a home of country music. I love country music, by the way.
I know you do. You love old country music.
The old 80s country.
Oh, yeah, not old, but like the middle
90s.
old.
Yeah. Well, Old Dominion has a song called One Man Band. And there's a lyric that goes like this. I don't want to be a one-man band. I don't want to be a Rolling Stone alone. Putting miles on a rundown van. Baby, we can take our own show on the road.
You did forget the line about we're going to get tattoos in trash hotel rooms.
I did.
Which is also a funny one.
Yeah. So the song's about making music together, but the principle applies to ministry as well, which is we're going to do this together. And early in our marriage, we made a decision that we were going to do our very best to tackle ministry together.
Mm-hmm. I think that oftentimes we talk about the man's calling to ministry, but we neglect to talk about the woman's call to ministry as well. And I don't have a specific moment where I'm like, man, I was called to ministry and I need to go to seminary, which many do. But I do think just by default, when you became pastor at Inglewood, that was, in a way, God calling me to ministry as well.
That's right.
I mean, you can't do it separately.
Attention, I'm about to use my bachelor's in biology. Are you ready?
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. One of the only times it's ever applied to my actual career. In DNA, there are 2 strands. You bring those 2 strands together and they create this powerful combination. And I do think in marriage, God has so ordained for the 2 strands to come together to form one. And when our gifts combine, when you and I find a way for the best of you to come out, the best for me to come out in an event or in a ministry together, it's not only, I think, more impactful, it's a way more fun. Mm-hmm. And so we wanted to talk today a little bit about what we've learned along the way, because it's not easy.
Well, I want to say something to the DNA thing, because people will say to us a lot, like, I could never work with my spouse. And I totally understand that not everybody can, but I do think that even if you're listening to this and you're not ministry partners, you should have some sort of partnership in ministry, whether that's serving in your local church, whether that's, you have a home group, because it's just part of like you have to have that mutual DNA, like you're talking about.
You have to connect in ministry. So whether you work together or not is not the issue. And in fact, you and I would admit there's certain things we should not do together. It's ugly every time.
I actually don't agree with that.
Really? You love doing everything with me.
No. I'm kidding.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the hard things we've learned along the way. These are like lessons, but also just principles we've learned along the way in working together. So you want to take the first one?
Sure. I mean, we talked about this a little bit this morning when we were recording an episode, but just said we've learned there are different seasons in ministry. And so just because something works in one season, it's not necessarily going to work again. And I mean, I think that's been the principle that's been the hardest for us in the last few years at Lifeway, is because something worked in pastoral ministry does not mean it's going to work in the ministry context we're in now.
Especially in parenting, like when we had 4 babies in 4 years and you were home with the kids and all those diapers and all those bottles, there just wasn't capacity for you to partner with me a lot at the church. You would come when you could, but there's a season of ministry. And I love the idea of the snare of compare. I do think couples sometimes compare themselves to other couples, and that other couple you're comparing themselves to may have older kids. They may have a season of life where they're more free to be able to do those things together. So just understand that in each season, that partnership of ministry might look a little different, right?
Right.
Number 2, we've learned that people have a natural fear of nepotism. When we've worked together in the past, it's just been surprising at times that there is, because of abuse in the past, and there have been stories of people who work together on the same team or own a family business together, and everybody else who works on that team is miserable. We take that one story and we multiply it and say, well, it must be always bad for a husband and wife to work together or to lead together or to make decisions together.
I think what's hard about this is, when we were at Storyline, this was a battle that we fought. And I understand, because it was not easy for the staff to work with you and I together. Just always, I should say that. I mean, sometimes they had a great experience, and sometimes it was a little bit tricky in meetings. But I think what's sad about this nepotism term is that I do believe that sometimes God gives 2 people the same vision. And so, it's hard when you would have a vision for the church and I would have a vision and they would align, but maybe they didn't align with somebody else on the staff. And so it almost felt like it was wrong for us to say, no, God gave us this desire, and this is what the direction that we need to go, because it almost always went to, well, you guys are pairing up on us, or it's nepotistic and stuff. And I mean, what was your thought on that?
Well, what's weird about that is a lot of those meetings, I can remember you and I were on the opposite side of an argument. What's often remembered is the moment when I pick your side and side with you against another staff member, which creates some awkwardness. But again, the statement I use is, manage the risk, don't disqualify the partnership. There are ways to talk about this, to set up some guide rails, to set up some guide rails.
Guardrails?
Yes.
Okay. Guidelines, guardrails.
That's it.
Okay. Either one.
There are ways to set up guidelines and guardrails to make sure that this is controlled and there's accountability and there's, an open conversation about, hey, here's how we're going to handle this when we disagree in the room together, rather than just saying it can never happen. Yep. All right.
Yeah. Number 3 is that we've learned that God grows our marriage as he grows our faith.
Taking big steps together, grabbing each other's hand and jumping off a cliff. Every time we've done that, it's been super scary, but our relationship has grown. And so, I mean, coming to Lifeway was one of them. Planting a church was one of them. Even taking our first pastorate was one of them. But when we said we're going to do this together, and we shared that fear together, it grew us. And, I was thankful at Storyline. There were many areas that because I didn't know what I was doing, I learned to lean on you, and you had stronger instincts around lots of stuff than I did. And it was fun to see your gift shine in a way that mine never could, like planning events.
Right.
We should talk about staff meeting disaster. Do you remember this? Of course you do.
Which one?
One of the worst days of our marriage. We took the staff away for a retreat. We were like unpacking all this different vision, and I had a whole team in the room, and it became very clear that there was this major thing happening that was going to affect you, and you had no idea about it.
Well, our staff was like maybe 10, 11 people at that time. 2 of us were women, and the 2 women had no idea this was going on. And the 2 guys who presented it were like very far down the road. It was very clear they were really far down the road. And, this other lady and I look at Ben and said, like, do you know anything about this? And the guys were like, well, yeah, he's been in on all this, and she and I just felt very like betrayed, as if, why hadn't we heard? Because it was going to affect her because of her husband. It was going to affect me because of kids ministry stuff. And
more than betrayed, both of you started crying.
And neither of us are criers. And so we're both crying.
Upset tears in the middle of the staff meeting too, where we had to like call time out and like take a break and just go eat and try to like patch together the rest of the retreat. There was so much emotion in it and drama. And like I remember getting home from that retreat and just wanting to sleep for like 3 days. And I mean, this is the challenge of working together in ministry, is that there are going to be explosions. There are going to be moments where this is really hard and we've got to like figure this out. But I would still say it's worth it.
Sure.
I would still say it's worth it. And I would say in every moment where there's been intense pain, we've dug in and thought, okay, why was this so painful? What can we learn from this? How do we move forward?
Right.
Number 4, we have learned that decision-making can be difficult when you work together in ministry. Lynley and I are both fierce personalities. We're both strong-willed people. And when we have to make decisions together, it can definitely be fiery disagreement.
Those are my words.
And so we have really had some doozies when it comes to disagreeing about what we should do in ministry.
Well, and the truth of the matter is that the final say has to come from typically the senior pastor, which was always you in our case. And so we really had to learn how to come to a peaceful place. And I think we still struggle with this of when we both have really strong opinions, who wins? I mean, that's the question. Is like, who gets to win this fight? And that's not even the right word, because a lot of times nobody wins. But I just felt like, I mean, the thing that I've had to like say over and over to you is, I just need you to hear my opinion, and I need you to not pretend like you've forgotten that you asked me my opinion. And so, like, if we have this conversation, for example, about a decision, and I get to give my opinion, and you still go in the other direction, like, that never upsets me if you go in the other direction, because you do have to make the ultimate decision. What upsets me is that if you forget to tell me what direction you go in, and then I hear it from someone else, and I feel like you didn't even have the respect to come back to me and say, I heard what you said, I thought about it, but I really feel like God's leading me in this direction, and I need your support.
Yeah.
Well, I would love to support you then. And
that's a good point.
Those things go both ways.
Yeah, and one of the things that's hard for me in those moments when you would disagree with me is I would say things to you like no other staff member would say that to me. Like, you so freely say to me that you disagree with me. Like, I would be mad that you would oppose me in ways that other staff people wouldn't. But you're my wife. Of course, you're going to feel a certain level of freedom to speak that other staff members would feel more guarded or more fearful in being that honest with me. I can remember decisions where me and a couple of guys made a decision, and you'd be like, was there a woman in the room when you guys decided that? Because practically speaking, that's going to be very difficult for moms or ladies. So we just had to work through all that.
I mean, that's happened here even at Lifeway. Yeah. There's been times where it has nothing. I have zero decision-making skills here. That doesn't fall under my jurisdiction or whatever, but there are times when I'll say something, you'll ask my opinion, I'll say something, and then you would say, no one else would respond like that.
Right.
I'm like, well, of course not.
Nobody else is your wife.
Well, no, I want to say, you can't fire, like, you don't have a paycheck over my head. I mean, it's just harder. So it's just, it's a different dynamic when you do work together.
And on the subject of decision making, staff meetings could be awkward because I would subconsciously, we'd be talking about a decision and not sure what to do. And I would find my eyes constantly shifting over to you to try to read your body language And staff members pointed that out and could see that I was particularly sensitive to you being pleased with the outcome.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, that was equally hard for me, though, because I felt like I had to plaster a fake smile on my face to make sure that you're okay and they're okay, that you and I are okay. I mean, the whole process was just a little bit awkward sometimes because there were things, and I wear my emotions on my face. And so there were times where I thought an idea was not great. But I have to balance, your feelings and their feelings and the whole thing.
And our two personalities do collide in that. Like, I have a new idea every morning and I want to throw it at you, and you're the person that has to process ideas, or you immediately think, will it work?
I don't feel like I have to process them as much as I just know from the start that it's not good. My discernment tells me that that's not going to work.
But I've had to work over the years to not get my feelings hurt, to know, okay, Lynley is not an enthusiast.
Yes.
No matter what I say right here, she's not going to jump up and down and scream that this is the best thing she's ever heard.
Okay, tell me when you have ever done that with an idea. You're like a lawyer when I give you an idea and I have to defend it. Why do we think that's a good idea?
Well, because
but you always want me to be an enthusiast.
Well, my ideas are really good and yours aren't. That's normally the problem.
Okay. I
so,
get that.
Understanding each other's personalities. You are a problem-solving, you see problems when you hear an idea. Oh, there's going to be some problems here.
No, it's not problems. It's logistics.
Okay, logistics.
It's not.
That's exactly
don't make me
right.
a Debbie Downer.
Yes.
But we have learned, even the other day he came in at 5:55 a.m. and
I actually came sliding in my socks
yes.
like Tom Cruise.
You actually did that 3 times
In
because I
Risky
didn't
Business.
laugh the first 2, and
yes,
I was
went back and ran in again.
I'm not going to laugh the 3rd time. Don't keep doing it. It's not going to work.
It was a great idea.
And you came sliding in. You said, I've got this really great idea. And we have learned, I just said, hey, I know it's going to be amazing because I love your ideas. I'm going to need to hear it in about 90 minutes. So just give me some time. And so, I do think that we've learned that with each other, just saying, the timing has to be right.
Right. And understanding each other's personalities. The last one is, we have learned that there will always be critics and naysayers. If you work together in ministry, some people aren't going to like it. Some people aren't going to like you. Some people aren't going to like you as a couple. They're going to find something to complain about or to pick at. So Lynley and I have had different people come up to us over the years and say things to try to divide us or discourage us. And if you feel called to it and you feel like the Lord is blessing it, you have to just put criticism aside and continue to do what God's called you to do.
Mm-hmm. I think people will always also individually come up to us and say something about the spouse.
Like the other one?
Yeah, and we've had to learn to just say, I think you need to go to him, or you've had to say, you need to go to her and say that. Don't try to divide us. That's a lesson we've learned just talking about. Even recently, someone asked us about our biggest mistakes. And we can fight all we want, but the minute someone else criticizes you, it's different.
Right.
And so, that's a hard thing with naysayers, is that when they try to get us divided against each other.
Right.
So we've talked about the hard parts, and kind of in light of what Nicole Zazowski says of what if it's wonderful, there are some really special joy of working together. And so for some of you listening that may be thinking, why are we doing this? Because what they're saying sounds really hard. There are some extra special fruits of working together, I think.
And I've been reading a lot about writers recently and the process they go through in writing, because I'm just fascinated with writers. I've yet to find a writer that says that it's easy. It's really easy to sit down and just whip out a book. Mm-hmm. All of them say the same thing. It's torturous. There are days I just want to quit. I struggle with self-loathing. And anything that you set out to do, just like partnering in ministry, there are days where it's just hard when you wonder, is it worth it? But the things we're about to share really do make it worth it.
I think even when you say partnering in ministry, I think of just partnering in life. And so for people who are listening to this that aren't in ministry together, it's so interesting. I just saw a friend whose husband has graduated from medical school, and they're having a doctor's wife gathering. And they're just talking about how, you basically lose your spouse through those 4 years of medical school. And
they got to support each other.
And then they go into residency, how hard it is. So, I don't want it to sound like, pastors and pastors' wives are the only part. It's just it's hard partnering in life together.
Trying to be one is hard, no matter if you're in ministry or not.
Right.
So here are the things that we have found, like in ministry, though, that have made it worth it for us. So, number one, when we have partnered together, we have grown spiritually.
Which sounds so simple.
Yeah. I love that book, Elephant Prayers, we read years ago.
Explain the premise of that book.
Yeah, the idea was there's this guy who wrote this book called Elephant Prayers, and he said that he prayed for his youth group. He was a youth pastor. He just felt led to pray. He really wanted to have an event where an elephant showed up. It's so random. He goes, I know it was weird to pray that, but I felt led to pray. I saw this elephant, and it never happened. And years later, they were on a mission trip across the world, and he was in his room, and he looked out the window, and all of his kids were out, the students were out in this courtyard, and there was an elephant. And God answered the prayer way later in his life in a way he had not perceived. And so he said, we have not because we ask not, is what Jesus says. So we should, as a couple, have dreams that we pray for, like, God, what if you really did do this for us? Like, what if this thing that's in our hearts could come true? Yeah. And as we've prayed those things together and we've seen God move and do things for us, it's grown us spiritually, not only just closer to God, but closer to one another spiritually. Well,
I remember we put together an elephant prayer list with our church plant, like with the core group when we were just beginning. And so, I mean, that's a really fun exercise to do with your core team. If you're just starting out as a pastor, if you guys are trying to, dream up a new vision, I mean, we put down all kinds of things. And it was so fun to see them come true.
Yeah. Angie's in the room right now, our producer. And one of the elephant prayers for this year was that we would have 100,000 downloads in our new podcast. And we passed it.
Oh, for 2022.
For 2022.
That was a 2022 thing, yes.
I remember you wrote that down, and we made a note, like, let's pray that, wouldn't it be wild if 100,000 downloads happened? And it finished higher than that.
I feel a little bit defensive
okay.
to our audience of that it's a numbers-driven thing. So my heart in that was not that it's 100,000 because of the number itself, but just the potential for impacting families in ministry that are having either a really great time or a hard time. And so I just felt like that was a number to say, God, if you would do this for us, because my heart behind this is never to like overly advertise the podcast. I really want it to grow organically, that somebody hears it,
right,
shares it. And so that the bigger prayer for me was just that people were listening and sharing it versus it being, all over everywhere kind of thing. So it makes me nervous when you say that because
I know, but now you're sounding like a dream squasher. Because who sets out to do a podcast and says, I hope we get at least 3 downloads?
Are you calling me Debbie Downer again?
Well, I'm just like, it's okay to dream. Like, what if we stuck a big number out there and prayed that it would happen? And it happened. Like, that's why Scripture says, no eye has seen, no ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. God wants us to ask for things and do it together as a couple. And occasionally, all those prayers that we put on the list for the church plant didn't happen.
No.
But some of them did.
Right.
And it was a day of celebration. So we've grown spiritually. Second of all,
we've become better friends, which is clear to the audience.
You are such a good friend.
Thank you.
That was awkward. Have you ever gone on a mission trip without your spouse and you come back and you've got photos and you're trying to somehow communicate how wild this experience was in your life, but the photos just seem so weak in capturing what happened to you there? When you don't do ministry together, that's like an everyday occurrence. When you're not trying to find things to do together where you have a shared experience, you're not growing in your friendship. You're growing individually.
Well, that's what, I mean, it's to me just shared experience more than shared ministry. And we read a marriage book that talked about the first person that you want to tell a piece of good news to is your best friend. And it should always be your spouse. Like if something happens at work for you, I mean, I hope that I'm your first call. And there have been times where I'm not your first call and it's hurt my feelings because I think, gosh, I wanted to celebrate that with you first. And vice versa. Let me restate. I mean, there have been times where I got pieces of information and I didn't share it with you first. And, I know that's hard for you.
I just love when the golden moments happen in ministry together. Like, they don't happen all the time, but when they happen, they're memorable. I actually had one today, like an hour ago. We came up with an idea, like, what if this summer at the big Southern Baptist Convention, we took some of the interviews from the Glass House and put it into a magazine where people could read and consume the content that these amazing conversations with pastors and wives have produced. And we just walked out there and saw the first look at the design and the content.
The layout of it all.
It was so beautiful. I felt so close to you in that moment. Like, holy cow, look what God has done here. This is such an amazing resource. And sometimes when you do ministry together, you have days where you're like, I don't think we did anything good today. But there are days when it just feels so worth it. And so we become better friends when we do ministry together. So we grow spiritually, we become better friends. And lastly, we find more ways to partner together. So as we do things together, we discover things that we like doing together. And this podcast is one of them. When we said yes to Lifeway, we never sat down in Denver and said, hey, what if we get there and start a podcast?
I don't even listen to them very much. I don't listen to podcasts very much.
I don't think you've ever listened to a podcast other than Crime Junkie.
Oh, I like Crime Junkie. No, I've listened to them now that we do them. And the fun thing about podcasting now is that I have such a different respect for people who do podcasts often. I mean, I have a huge respect for people who even sit in front of the camera every night, a news anchor type person.
Gosh.
Because talking into a microphone, looking into a camera, some of that stuff is so hard. And so, it's fun creating new experiences that also create a new level of respect for people out there who do jobs that you just assume are easy. Totally.
Our friend Todd Atkins, he has 5LQ. It's a leadership podcast here at Lifeway. He just did his 500th episode.
That's a lot.
And we were looking at his lineup the other day, and we're like, that is a huge feat to do 500 episodes. And I was like, he must feel so proud of that. So when you do ministry together, you find new things to do, you find new goals. And I just never would have dreamed this podcast thing, but it's been so much fun.
Yeah.
So, don't be afraid to try. And that's really what we want to say today is if God has called you to be one in life, search and pray for ways to serve together. Even if it's going to the soup kitchen to serve the poor together, which we've done recently and was awesome. So maybe an event. Or just let's do something together where we are side by side in ministry. It's not just you up on the stage and me on the floor, where we're shoulder to shoulder making a difference together.
You said me up on the stage. That's not going to happen.
It could happen. You told me that your dream would be to be a dancer for Justin Timberlake. It could still happen.
That is not going to happen. Trust me.
Well, I do think there are times, though, like I've been places where you were up front leading, and I was like, holy cow, she's doing such an amazing job. I can think of meetings at like Vacation Bible School. You're training all the teachers, and I was sitting in the back like, how does she memorize all this information? It's fun to watch your spouse shine in ministry and to be there to be a support. So anyway, we wanted to have a moment to share all that with you today. I hope it encourages you, whether you and your spouse work on staff together or whether you just try to find ways to serve with your kids together. We think it's worth it.
The Glass House is a production of Lifeway. It's produced and edited by Angie Elkins, sound engineering by Dale Sandberg, original music by Robert Elkins, photography by Rebecca McVeigh, and artwork by Heather Brzezinski. We are your hosts, Ben and Lynley Mandrell. Thanks for listening.